Hi there. Welcome to Souls and Hearts Be with the Word. This is our weekly podcast where we reflect on the upcoming Sunday readings from a psychological perspective. And I am Dr. Gerry Crete, a marriage and family therapist in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here with my co host.
I'm Dr. Peter Malinowski, clinical psychologist here in Indianapolis, Indiana.
We're so excited to be with you this week. We're excited about the readings. This is the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time. We've got some cool parables to explore today, and and we actually have a really interesting message about why it's okay to pray badly. And Dr. Peter's going to explore that and explain what he could possibly mean by that. And we're just
You're not
looking forward
distant,
to it.
you're not distancing yourself from it, are you, Dr. Gerry?
No. I embrace it. I embrace it. We have to learn how to pray badly,
Right,
and
right.
but it needs a little explanation. So
It
please stay
definitely
with
does.
us for that explanation. And if, by the way, it's really good to have read or to listen to the readings before you listen to us discuss this. It's not any kind of requirement, of course, but it might be nice. And so if you haven't read it already, you might want to go to our sister podcast, Hear the Word, and we actually just read it to you there. It's all we do. We just read the various readings and the responses, and you can just sit back and take it in and then come back over here. And Hear the Word is now on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's been on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all those things up till now, and now we are on YouTube, so you can watch us read it to you, which is that much more exciting. But we
Yes.
actually do put the words up on the screen, so you can read along. So,
That's
oh
great.
well, Dr. Peter, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, and it is great to be here with you, Dr. Gerry. It is great to be here with all of you, our audience. It's a blessing to have you with us. And that this whole thing about prayer, I think, is just so important. And when I was reading these readings, I was like, I was like, there's a whole catechesis here about the nature of God. There's a whole catechesis here about the nature of God in the first reading in wisdom. And so that
Mhm.
struck me. And so I always like, well, that's that first impression. So I was curious about like what really struck you, like at first glance when you look at these readings for the 16th century in ordinary time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the reading on wisdom, which I think is such an interesting book, which I know it's deuterocanonical, I believe, right? So if
Right.
any of our Protestant listeners may not even be that familiar with it, but it's really interesting because it talks about God and it talks about how He has, of course, power and mastery over the universe, and He's the source of justice and might, and He can condemn, and yet it it makes the point that He judges with, I think it uses the word clemency,
Right.
and lenience even,
Right.
and and kindness, and it really brings home that point to me. I feel like a lot of our leadership, our political leadership, lacks that sense that yes, you have power, but you are kind,
Hmm.
lenient. You bring, and it just feels like a positive kind of paternal care for the people that you serve. And I think God sets that example, which is so cool.
Well, and I think that the reason that this gets so emphasized in the Book of Wisdom, and it's also emphasized in Psalm 86, which is our responsorial psalm,
Hmm.
Lord, you are good and forgiving, abounding in kindness to all who call upon you, is kind of for two reasons. One is, when you look at the times when these readings were being written down, I mean, the ancient gods were kind of brutal.
Hmm.
The Hebrews were in an environment in which human sacrifice was still common, to angry gods. I mean, these are things that are being revealed to us because we don't know them without God telling us, without God sharing that with us. It's not something that's going to come to us naturally because of the way that we distort things. So the idea that God is actually, gently sharing with us who he is. The first thing that happened when we sinned in the Garden of Eden, right, Adam and Eve, is that they fled from God and they hid from him. right? It's that came in, and now now we, because of the effects of sin, we distort everything about God,
Hmm.
about these things. So we've got to relearn it, and we've got to relearn it experientially. We actually have to learn it not like we would learn algebra, not like we would learn about, about chemistry. We actually have to learn that experientially. We have to enter into the relationship with God. And
Hmm.
so the way we do that is primarily through prayer and the sacraments. Those are the ordinary means of connecting with God. And that's why I was thinking about praying badly. And G.K. Chesterton has this quote, and it's from his book "What's Wrong with the World" that came out in 1910. And he says that if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And I just love that quote, right? And because I think about things like breathing, right? I mean, I would much rather breathe badly than to not breathe at all. And I think for me and for lots of people, we've gotten the message that if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well, or it's worth
Hmm.
doing perfectly. And that can actually hold us back, from actually trying things, because we may not feel competent at them. We may feel a sense of shame about how we do. We maybe have performance anxiety and not feel like we're doing this well, and so we may avoid things that
Yeah.
that are difficult.
Well, Peter, think about Souls and Hearts, because we're a couple of therapists. We decided to do this. We're going to do a podcast. No idea. I'm an introvert, don't want people to see me and or
Yeah,
talk. And so, I mean, I've
yeah,
had lots of experience now talking in front of people,
right,
but just the
right,
idea of doing that to
right,
some unknown audience is
right.
was frightening. And I look back at some of our early Be With the Words, and I think we've improved a lot. But
There was
you know
lots of
what?
room for improvement, and still is. But yeah,
For sure, and there still is. But you know what? If we believe in it, we just have
yeah,
to kind of trust and just
right.
do it, and be okay to do it badly at first, because we feel prompted by God to do it. And I think that's what the reading's
That's
telling
that's
us.
that's what comes down. He wants to use imperfect instruments like us, to get this message out. And you know what? I mean, the audience, you guys have been really good to us. There's been so many positive compliments that we've gotten, and you've been really forgiving with all of our, foibles and stuff that we're not, all our imperfections, and the fact that we're not professionals at this, is so that's been a blessing too. Like, we're all kind of in this, together. So
Hmm.
that's been a blessing. That's really been a blessing. So we're going to do these things, and the most important things that we can do are the things that are the hardest to do well. Like,
Hmm.
who says, for example, what saint says, I really pray well. I'm really a master of prayer. I have actually come this close to perfection in my prayer. No, saints don't say that,
Right.
or who says about, loving one's spouse. I love my spouse very perfectly, very efficiently,
Hmm.
very effectively. I'm a very effective, in my charity towards I mean, that sounds ridiculous, right? So these things that are so important, we're going to have to give up our desires for perfection, and sometimes our desires for competence even, right?
Right. That could be
So
really hard for a lot of people, right?
yeah, yeah,
If they do have it, it's either an on or off switch. I'm going to do it
right.
perfectly or not.
Hmm.
In which case your examples are perfect. You know what? God just, we have to love our spouse, our friends, our children, whatnot, and we just have to be okay with the fact that it's a learning curve. What's hitting me though in the reading in Romans, right? It says we do not know how to pray as we ought.
Right.
So it's basically saying, St. Paul is basically saying, yeah, you can't pray well. You don't pray well. But the Spirit Himself intercedes with inexpressible groanings. So
Right.
isn't it comforting to know that He's got our back?
The
you know?
Spirit has our back. Right. Well, first of all, Paul is saying we, right? He's including himself. He's
Right.
including himself in that. And what you said right there is that the Spirit is not only going to show us, how to pray, but the Spirit is also going to intercede for us. He's going to help us with the whole endeavor. And you know what that made me think of? You know what that made me think of is, just how little children are first learning to talk. First learning to communicate when they're, 18 months old, 14 months old, you start getting those first few words. I was
Hmm.
thinking about a good father, and how a good father helps that child along in learning to communicate, right? The father isn't sitting there kind of A good father isn't sitting there with arms crossed, saying, "Hey, your grammar is wrong and your diction is poor, and you've got to be better than this, or I'm just not going to talk to you." No, a good father is like really encouraging, trying to make sense out of what the child's meaning is and helping the child, in ways that bring that child to a better level of communication because of the love that the father has for the child, right? So there's
Hmm.
all this helping not only with diction and grammar and all those things that go into verbal expression, but also helping with intention, helping the child to figure out kind of what's happening in relationships. So, and God's like that with us. Remember, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, right? For the kingdom of God is made up of such as these. And I think a lot of times we don't actually approach God that way, when we pray. So there can be an issue around humility here, to say, yeah, we don't know how to pray as we ought. Um,
Hmm.
and that was I picked up on that line out of Romans as well. It's like, wow.
It's yeah, yeah. It's funny. We've had some people even reach out to us, listening to Be with the Word and your podcast on
The
coronavirus,
coronavirus crisis. Yeah. Yeah.
about praying. And some people are really stuck between like, I have all these disciplines, but sometimes it feels hollow, or sometimes it feels too much. We don't want to do them,
Hmm.
and what do I do? And do I like give them all up and stop praying, or do I just like jettison all those things, or what? Or is there some other way? And here's my, I think my answer to that. I'm thinking of one particular person was, um, we need some discipline, right? Like I feel like there needs to be an anchor. Like I've been,
Right.
like I
Right.
know your family prays the rosary together. I had the
Right.
pleasure of seeing you guys, being with you guys as you pray the rosary together as a family. I just think that is so beautiful, and it creates like a consistency every night.
Right.
It's an anchor, if you will.
Right.
But there also needs to be freedom for personal prayer and exploring different options, and different personalities are attracted to different kinds of prayer, and different times of life or things you're going through might call for a different kind of prayer. So there also needs to be a place, I think, for flexibility and exploration,
I
right?
think we need to remember that, yeah, I think we need to remember that prayer is all about relationship with God, right? The old saying, he looks at me and I look at him. I think this was one of
Mm,
the parishioners of the Curie of Ars said that, sitting in the
right.
back of the parish church. He looks at me, I look at him. So the prayer is to foster a relationship. Somebody once told me, we were talking about prayer, and he was talking about praying after mass, and he says, "Yeah, I really, I look forward to getting through my prayers so that I can be with God." Like to getting through my prayers, right? So that I can be with God. He had a list of
Mhm.
things that he would pray, like a set of prayer cards and stuff that he would pray through,
Yeah, yeah.
but somehow that was disconnected from God. And he heard himself saying that and was like, whoa, there's something off here. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I agree with you. But again, if we just are going to wing it, that often is not enough to actually bring us into relationship, because it's so easy for this to get pushed to the side. So that
Yeah.
balance between structure, and for me, a lot of times it's structure around time, just setting aside the time and then having some flexibility within that time to see what the calls are, what the touches are, what the relational aspects are that happen in
Mhm.
that prayer. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember. I can't remember which nun it was. It was an Orthodox. I'm not sure. I think Greek, but I'm not sure. Orthodox nun. I was listening to at one point, and about talking about prayer, and she's in a monastery, and they were asking her like, how much do you pray from the prayer book, the morning prayers and the
Hmm.
akathist and various things, and she said sometimes I will just pray and I'll start the Our Father. I'll just say Our Father, and that's the rest of my prayer for the next hour.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, she's not saying that's what she does every day, but she's saying, sometimes if I get to Our Father and I contemplate that, and somehow now I'm connected to God and I'm relating to Him as Father and whatnot. Sometimes that's all I need. You know what I
Right.
mean? Which is to
Right.
your point, like not to get through the prayers so then you can connect.
Right. Right.
Maybe those prayers are only there in order to connect.
As
And
as a
yeah,
means, yeah, and
yeah,
they don't need to be turned into an idol, right?
yes, right.
We have to be careful about that. That all be tempered with, with charity. That all be in charity. But I think we need the freedom to be able to try new things in prayer.
Hmm.
Sometimes, I hear about people's prayer lives being really stale, because they've been kind of doing the same thing. And as you move in through the spiritual life, I would expect that prayer lives are going to change depending
Yeah.
on, kind of where you're at. So, I
Well,
really,
by
again,
the way, do you know what I've been having fun with
tell
lately?
me what you've been having fun with lately.
Really, just the last few months. Ever since I discovered that I could actually hit some notes when I go low, when I go like 3 octaves lower than how the music's written,
Well, and
or
that's
how it's
because
typically sung.
you're a double bass. You're a double bass is what this
That's
is,
right. That's
you
right,
know.
Peter. So, so, so I've been having, and usually a lot of hymns, like a lot of the songs that I grew up with, which God bless them, I'm so sick of them, but I never want to hear pieces flowing like a river ever again in my life. However, there were some songs, as much as we can make fun of them now, that actually did really move me. I remember
Yeah.
being very spiritually moved by On Eagle's Wings when I was a kid. But On Eagle's Wings is normally sung like and I will raise you up. Like I can't even hit that right to save my life. But because I was raised on all those kind of hippie songs, I did it. I missed out on classic hymns,
Mhm.
and I've been in this journey of discovering how beautiful they are and how rich the words are. And so I've been like trying to take like maybe a different hymn once a month or so, and I'll learn about, like, I go and I find it, I look it up, I see the different versions that exist. I like try to figure out like the history. Like, Be Thou My Vision is one I was stuck on actually for more than a month. Like, my wife was starting to get sick of hearing me sing it in the shower and everything. But because it's sort of this, but I like the history of it. It's like some
Right.
monk who lost, apparently some Irish or Celtic monk who lived in some monastery and lost his vision, as the
Vision.
story
Yeah.
goes. And so God becomes his vision, and he writes this beautiful hymn, and it's this interesting Celtic melody. So, but then I get practicing, and it becomes that hymn became like my prayer, and I moved on to other hymns after. And it's like, I don't know, it's just one way that my prayer life has been enriched. And for somebody else, that might not work for them, right? There might be another prayer form or something to explore that would work for someone else.
Well, and it brings me to the idea of, again, like being childlike in our prayer, right? I mean, you're playing, right, with these songs. There's a sense
Hmm.
of play that's coming in here. And that's one of the hallmarks of being childlike, is that, when you sing, I'm sort of envisioning you as playing with God,
Mm,
playing with God, and what a beautiful thing, because that's one of the ways that children relate
mm,
with loving fathers, right? They play together because that's how children learn about the world. That's how they inform their experience. They get informed by experience through playing. So that's just really beautiful. That's just really
mm.
beautiful. So that spontaneity, and that was not how I used to pray. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was very, very, about this, where I was
I do.
very rigid about prayer. So I had come up with what was with essentially what was a prayer tithe, right? So I would set aside 1.6 hours per day, because that's 10% of my waking hours, and considered, maybe it should be 2.4 if I were really generous, because that's 10% of 24 hours. And I would pray actually in Latin, the the old breviary, except for the office
Mm,
of readings. What was the equivalent of the office of readings? And that took a long time, but it felt like I was performing it well, right? So this is like kind of
Hmm.
near and dear to me. This is part of the reason why, this idea of praying badly is like really important to me, because at one point my spiritual director said, what is this about? Let's set that aside, because he understood that I was caught up in the form,
Right.
not in the relational aspects of it. But for me, that was hard to trust. It was hard to trust that what God really wanted was a relationship from me and not a good performance in prayer. And
Hmm.
so there was a sort of sense of safety and comfort in the familiarity of these forms that were the official prayer of the church, and liturgical prayer and so on and so forth. So I really want to encourage people to take some risks in that prayer, relational risks, to think about like what kind of gets in the way of that spontaneity, that childlike
Hmm.
spontaneity. How kids always say, the funniest things, how that spontaneity brings a lot of life and joy into families. That's what I think we need to be bringing into our prayer. Um,
Hmm. Do we
so
want to say anything about the parable? Because
Oh
we
yeah,
didn't
we got to say some things
get
about the
into that.
parable. Well, I love to go back to I like to read different translations, and I actually go back and read the Latin sometimes for these. And what struck me in the Latin was this word, zizania. Zizania is translated in almost all translations as weeds, right? So now this is the parable where the sower went out into the field and sowed good seed, right? But then the enemy came in and sowed weeds among the seed, right? But he didn't
Hmm.
sow weeds in the sort of generic word weeds. He sowed zizania, which is actually translated as darnel ryegrass. Okay, and what that is it's sometimes called fake wheat or false wheat. It's actually very similar, morphologically, to wheat. It looks very much like wheat. So it grows to about 3 feet high, just like wheat does. It's very similar to wheat. It can be very hard for people that aren't familiar to tell the difference. Um,
Right.
but it's interesting that the main difference is in the seeds, like in the wheat kernels. Right, the wheat kernels are brown, and the darnel ryegrass, or the zizania kernels, are black. And this whole business of sowing this stuff, like it was a thing 2,000 years ago. Like the Roman law actually prescribed specific penalties for sowing zizania in wheat fields. Like they actually had
Right.
like prescriptions
Because
about that.
just to make clear, like what I think what you're saying and what I understood is people would put this crap in other people's
And
fields
other
to
people's, yeah, it
wreck
was a
their
way to
crop.
wreck their
So,
harvest, right? Because it does intertwine. This stuff is grown pretty densely. It does intertwine, and there wasn't ways to readily separate the
mhm.
um, the seed from the darnel ryegrass from the wheat. You would actually have to do it grain by grain in order to not. And this stuff actually could grow a kind of microbe on it, that would lead to a form of intoxication, kind of like what happened. What some people theorize happened in Salem. That led to like some hallucinations and so forth. There's a way that it can ferment and stuff like
Oh,
that.
I
It could
didn't know
actually be
that.
really harmful and can be hallucinogenic. So there's like all these things that are wrapped up actually in the story that we might not think about. But I
Well,
was thinking
Peter,
about.
I appreciate that we're getting a botany lesson here from you in this.
Well, all
Um,
things farming, right? I mean, I'm just gonna,
yeah.
I, but what's interesting is that I was thinking about like how it can be really difficult looking from the outside to recognize what really is good wheat and what
Mm,
is the darnel ryegrass, right? And about
right.
how, like in our day and age, there have been many plants that have been mistaken for good wheat. I'm thinking about, for example, the former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, right? Looks really
Right.
good, is very public persona, so on and so forth, but the fruit, right, is where you can tell the difference. And
Yeah.
many times people have been disappointed by people in the church or by people that have appeared holy, but
Right.
who have had this dark side to them, or this dark interior, when push came to shove. So, when
Yeah.
things were revealed. So that
Yeah.
was really sort of weighing on me as I read about this. I was thinking about that as I was reading about this.
It's funny too because I've had a certain amount of experience with, Regnum Christi, the Legion of
Right.
Christ,
Legion of
and they
Christ.
had the
Yeah.
whole Father Mastiel, who was their
Right.
founder, who turned out to be rather depraved, and but the order like did a lot of outwardly good things. And I can recall in Regnum Christi, like, having a bunch of prayers you had to do every day. Like there was a sort of like a checklist, and you kind of had to, you checked in that you did all those things. And that isn't objectively wrong at all, right? Like
Right.
having a list of
Right.
prayers that you try to do every day is not by
Right.
itself a
Right.
problem, except there was a heart missing. It seemed to me, and many good people in that community really had a good heart, I believe, and really did live that out sincerely. But it would be easy to put on the outward front that things that you're doing all these good things and you appear to be good and appear to be holy when in fact you have other motives. And I
Right.
feel like that really is what this parable is kind of saying. But what it says as well, though, is that I, at least I get out of it, is that we don't need to worry about it. I mean, yes, on some level, if we encounter sinful,
Right.
problematic
Right.
things, they need to
Right.
be called out and fixed.
Right.
But
Right.
but ultimately, Christ is going to separate those out,
Right.
and He's going
Right.
to take care of it.
Right.
And we
Right.
don't need to be consumed with anxiety and worry about it. We just need to trust in Him and just make sure our hearts are in the right place, and that He's going, He will take care. And that's a very comforting thing, and it ties in with the other readings to understand. In the Romans, it's saying, pray as best as you can. You don't have to be
Right.
perfect. The Holy Spirit will
Right.
take care of the rest. And the first reading, wisdom, it's like, you know what? God's a good God, and
Hmm.
He's going to treat you with lenience and kindness ultimately. But it seems to be if your heart is in the right place, right? And
That's right.
that's our job, is to make sure our heart is in the right place.
That's right. That's right. And so, from a psychological perspective, right, the kinds of things that keep us from trusting generally are often the kinds of things that get in the way of us trusting God, right? The
Right.
kinds of things that keep us from, being spontaneous, relationally, are often the kinds of things that we have trouble with in our relationship with God. And so, I'm thinking about like um, what can, what can we do, right, to get better at, this sounds again funny, to get better at praying badly, right, to get away from our
Mhm.
perfectionistic ways of praying, or maybe
Right.
our really comfortable familiar ways. And how can we like take some risks, right? And it goes back to that issues about trust. So here's what I'm proposing. Here's what I'm proposing for all of you, is to really take to prayer and to God in prayer. Or if that's really difficult for some people, a lot of people have a lot of trouble praying to God the Father, especially. So this could be
Hmm.
also prayer to the Blessed Virgin Mary, or to one of the saints, Saint Joseph, or your guardian angel. But to take to prayer the things that are difficult about prayer, and to be willing to pray badly. If you look at the example of our Lord, he really connected with the people who related to him earnestly, honestly, in his heartfelt way, but that were criticized by other people, that other people would have said related to him badly. Like for example, Mary Magdalene, clinging to his feet, and washing his feet with her tears and drying them with her hair, and like this very earthy, human, spontaneous way. And he protected her from the criticism and defended her, right? So, and the beggars and the lepers, the tax collectors and the prostitutes, these are the people who are coming to him with those broken, contrite hearts, right? A humble, contrite heart you will not spurn. This is where we need to be earthy, we need to be real, we need to be honest, and it's hard for some of us to do that because we have experience in relationship where if we did bring those things to important people in our lives in the past, it wasn't okay.
Hmm.
It wasn't
Right.
accepted, right? So we've sometimes generalized that and we've incorporated that into how we see God.
Hmm.
So he's telling us here, that's not how I am. That's not how I am. I'm rich in kindness. I'm merciful. I'm lenient, clemency, like you brought up in the first reading. And I'm going to help you relate to me like that good father, teaching that child to talk, helping that child communicate.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how encouraging is that? And like it says in wisdom, the children will have hope. When you know your father loves you that way, it isn't an oppressive burden. It's not like in what was the readings we did. I forget if it was last week or the week before, but about the yoke will be
Right, right.
easy.
It's good fitting. It's well fitting. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Like this is all tailored to us. This is all about God knowing who we are and what we need and all things working together for good, for those
Hmm.
who love him, for those who love the Lord. Can we hold on to that? So
Yeah.
is
Uh
to
huh.
the challenge here is to try one new thing in your prayer.
Hmm. All right.
Something that's gonna like bring you that you think might bring you to that deeper level, right? And
Can I
to
add
act
here, if you do that, because this is Dr. Peter's giving you the action item. If
right,
if you do that, we would love to hear what it is. Like I just shared one which was doing these hymns, right?
right, right.
If you come up with something, I really want to know what it is, what your new thing is, and whether or not it worked or not, or whether you thought it was helpful or not, right? Because I hope you'll share that to us in the
Yeah,
comments.
send it to us. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, either on
definitely.
YouTube, or you can put comments. You can put comments on our website. All that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know because we're here to help strengthen each other, right? And I'm always edified when people take those leaps in prayer and they're connecting with God in a deeper way. And remember that this is really pleasing to God. And you may not feel that in your bones. You may not have a deep emotional sense of that or a deep intuitive sense of that,
Hmm.
but it really pleases God when we reach out to him in these ways and when he sees our desire to connect with him. And so and if you get off some, let's say that you go down a path and it doesn't really work out, remember there's all these passages in scripture about how he leaves the 99 sheep to go off and look for the one that strayed, right? So
Hmm.
even if you're something in your prayer didn't work out very well, you know he's going to come look for you, just like he looked for Adam and Eve immediately after they sinned. I love that imagery of him walking in the cool of the day. Adam and Eve had just eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They realized their eyes were open. They realized they were naked. They hid in the shrubs, and God came walking in the cool of the day, calling out to them, not because he didn't know where they were. He's omniscient. He knows exactly where they are. He's letting them know he's coming, right? He's understanding how distraught they are and how traumatized they are by their sin, and he's gentle with them. He never curses them. He curses the ground. He condemns the serpent, but he doesn't curse them. So that's the struggle, I think, for us, is to tolerate being small enough, young enough, childlike enough to receive the love of the Father, rather than to be, self-sufficient, right? Or to be working real hard in prayer to build something that's worthy of God. And we're never going to achieve that. So yeah.
All right. So we have an action item, which is to try something new.
Yeah, to
We
take a risk,
hope,
to take a dare. Yep.
yeah, yeah, we hope that you understood our meaning and you got to pray badly. Because everything worth doing is worth doing badly, like me singing in church, right? And so we need to get over our perfectionism
Right.
and Just launch in there
And
and do
over
it.
and to understand that God understands whatever else might be getting in the way too, and to bring that to him. That's actually, they can bring up trailheads for work, like if it's shame, right, or feeling unworthy, or whatever those things are. It's going to evoke that, so that that can come into the relationship, so God can heal that too. That's what
Absolutely.
we want, is the experience of relationship. That's what's going to heal us. It's the relational things that's the relationship that's going to heal. It's the love in the relationship that's going to heal us.
So
So,
speaking of relationships, if you're enjoying your relationship with us and be with the word, subscribe and share and let everybody know about it, and so we can grow our community and get our message out.
it's
And we
really
hope,
hard. It's really hard for us to get the message out. I had no idea how much noise there is in the internet. Like, it's really hard for us to even get noticed. So somehow you found us, and if you can pass this on to other people that you think might benefit from it, that is a gift. That is a gift to the other people. It's a gift to us, and it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, definitely
yeah.
share us with those that you know
And
that
if you
might
haven't
benefit.
already, go to soulsandhearts.com and register with us. And that way you'll get
Yep,
our weekly skim. It'll tell you about all of our podcasts, our
yep,
courses, our community, all the
yep,
different things that are going on, because we're continually growing. And every week we have different blogs and
yep.
all by these interestingly different mental health professionals, or other related professions. I thought the one on discernment by, was it John Fazzi, is it? Who's a canon lawyer, that came out a little while ago, was an interesting take. And every week we have something new. So
Well, we have multiple things new every week. We have new material coming out, you know, at least three and usually four, sometimes five times a week. So we're happening. It's happening over at soulsandhearts.com.
yeah.
We want to be the number one place where we are shoring up the natural foundation for the spiritual life. We're really focusing on that natural foundation because grace perfects nature. So we're really focusing on strengthening that, like John the Baptist, right? Preparing the way for the Lord, preparing our human formation, our natural formation for our spiritual lives, to have that solid base. And if that's what you're interested in, if you really want that for yourselves, then there's no better place on the internet to really get that than us. I don't think so. And that's by the grace of
Awesome.
God. So, yeah,
Absolutely. All right. So join us next week. We'll have another, we'll be exploring the readings again, and join us and hear the word, also to listen to the readings read to you, and join us in all the things we're doing, we hope. All right. Until next time, be still,
believe,
be
be loved.
loved. Take good care.
God bless you all.